my business hits, 100 grand, I'll be so happy. And then you hit your first, 6 figures in revenue and you realize like nothing's changed. um, so it was kind of like that, except it didn't translate to dollars. So it was even worse.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the 1% Podcast. I'm your host, Vin, and
I'm Shane.
And today we're joined by my man, Dan. Dan, how are you today?
Fantastic. How are you?
We're doing great, brother. Thanks for joining us here today. Thanks you go ahead? Of course. Can you tell the people what it is that you're up to? What's your business? What are you working on?
Yeah, so basically I live in Toronto, Canada, and I have a company called Shine Window Cleaning and another division of it called the Deck People. So we basically do exterior home services. So anything from window cleaning to those, mesmerizing videos you see on TikTok of pressure washing, gutter cleaning, outdoor painting and staining. And essentially what we do is we take care of people's homes, and our mission is to change the way home service businesses both behave and are viewed by the rest of the world.
So wait, are you one of those people on TikTok that I watch that does the power washing or no?
Yeah, we actually just got our first million view video. So I can safely, I used to say I am, but you probably haven't seen my content because none of them have popped off, and now we're starting to pop off. So you might be seeing it.
That's amazing. Has that translated into any direct business for you guys, or not as of yet?
Literally, like not even followers. It did like 1.1 million views. We got like 150 followers from it. So I think we just need to keep doing that and seeing what happens. But yeah, organic social is one of those things where I think it's going to take several years to build up. And I don't think it's ever going to be able to outperform my ad spend, but I think it will go hand in hand in kind of, keeping cost of advertising down and just, acting like a digital storefront so people can see us and build trust.
I love it.
We talk a lot about marketing. When you're a successful entrepreneur in business, marketing is just imperative to have, right? It's even not even just putting, 1,000, 10,000, 50,000 on ad spend and we're expecting a turn. It's more of, I need to stay relevant. I need to stay on top of mind. And especially services like yours, it's a need, right? Like my wife just told me that we need to get power wash done for our backyard and our front yard a couple weeks ago. And what just happened, I feel like obviously we all know the AI robots are listening in, but what popped up on my Facebook feed, that exact video of power washing, and it was before and after. And because it was a need and was on top of mind, I called them right away. So that marketing is definitely going to work. Retargeting campaigns are super imperative, especially with social channels. But it's always just a top of mind type of thing. But I love 100%. That. That's awesome. And congrats on your first million views.
Yeah, thank you. It's been like a year and a half in the making. So it was simultaneously very exciting and validating, while at the same time extremely, what's the word? Like, not disappointing, but like, lackluster. It's like when you think like, if my business hits, 100 grand, I'll be so happy. And then you hit your first, 6 figures in revenue and you realize like nothing's changed. So it was kind of like that, except it didn't translate to dollars. So it was even worse.
I'm curious on how you got started. When I actually got to talk to a little bit about, and he was the owner who was actually doing the pressure washing. He has 7, and he was only there because one of his guys called that sick and he just wanted to do it, which I love that. I'm very hands-on on my business as well, but he has 7 trucks, and he also does not really like a catch-all of services, but he also does indoor carpet cleaning. And then they also do, what's the one in the garage? I forgot what it was.
Epoxy.
Epoxy. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, how did you get started, and when did you decide to continue to add on services?
Yeah, it's a great story. Do you want the long version or the short version?
Tell the listeners all you got.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So I'll try to make it jam-packed with value. So basically, I was 19 and I grew up in Montreal. I went to business school there. And day 2 of business school, I saw my teacher was wearing a Rolex. I went up to him after class. I was very excited to learn from this guy who was, clearly doing something well with his life. And he was teaching a business strategy class. I asked him what kind of business he was running before he became a teacher. He told me he'd never run a business before. And so I said, well, my next question is, obviously you've done something, because you're wearing a Rolex. So, were you like a VP of something in a company? Like, what were you doing? And he gave me like the antithesis of the exact response I expected, which was, I've literally only ever studied and taught. And so I said, wait a minute. So you're telling me you're teaching a strategy class and you've never done anything in your life? And he's like, exactly. And so in that moment, I realized that I was never going to learn how to run a business in business school. And so simultaneously, a couple days later, I was in economics class and someone passed me a clipboard that I didn't really pay attention to. It just said something about like make money this summer and learn about business. So I just wrote my name. I never thought it out again. And I got some telemarketing agency in India call me 2 weeks later and say, with a heavy accent, like, I'm not going to mimic the accent, but you can imagine, like, would you like to come to this program to learn about business? And I was like, there's this heavy accent. I forgot about the clipboard. This must be a scam. And so just before I hang up on her, she's like, no, you put your name on the clipboard. Don't you remember? And I said, yeah, I think I did. She said, well, we're going to be at your school doing a talk if you want to learn about it. And I said, okay, I guess that seems like low risk. It's free. I'll go check this out. And so I go to school next week, and I go to this like auditorium, this small empty classroom, and there's this weird looking kid at the front of it who's maybe a couple years older than me, and he's standing up, and he basically gives this like 10-minute talk about how you can learn how to run a business with this program called the Summer Management Program, and they teach students how to do this by painting houses. And so the concept was basically, we're going to give you a painting franchise. There's other companies called College Pro or Student Works Painting, and they're pretty big in Canada. They have some in the States as well. And they give you the keys to this franchise. There's no upfront cost to buy in. And, the deal for them is they take on all the risk, but they also will take a higher royalty to make up for that risk later on the money you make. And the deal for you is you have no risk because you just buy in and maybe, you spend like $2,000 on some equipment and whatever, but they'll teach you all their systems. And they've been doing this for 30 years. When I joined, they were doing like 12 million across Canada. Now they're doing like 35 million, and they've got hundreds of these franchises across Canada. And so I came home and I told my dad, I'm going to sign up for this program and I'm going to start painting houses. And my dad is like Israeli immigrant entrepreneur who like can build anything. And he kind of looked at me sideways and was like, Dan, all you do is you smoke weed all day. You sleep in until 10 a.m. Like, you are not going to forget running a business. You're not going to paint houses. Like, I asked you to help me, with the paint the deck last year, and you came out for 30 minutes and you left. And I said, no, this is serious because I'm going to get paid to do this. And he said, well, we'll see about it. And so the deal was they taught me, they said, you're going to spend all winter on nights after class. You're going to come home from school, and from 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. until as late as you can, you're going to knock on doors. And then on the weekend, instead of hanging out with your friends, you're going to knock on doors. And we're going to teach you how to sign contracts for the summer and line up projects, convincing people to let you paint their house. And I was like, but I don't know how to paint. And they said, well, we'll teach you in the summer. You don't have to worry about that now. Just worry about getting contracts. And so, they gave me some quotas. And in the beginning, I was actually the worst person in the company. I was not scoring high. My manager was ready to drop me. Like, I couldn't figure it out. And keep in mind, like, I'm an Anglophone and Montreal is predominantly French. And so most people don't even open the door for you if you don't speak French. And so I had to learn basically French on the go through rapid fire cold calling in the middle of the night, bothering people at their homes. And so I ended up kind of, once production got in, I just kind of outworked everybody. I outworked my own incompetence, I like to say. And I just constantly bothered my manager for help to the point where, she had to like give me a limit where I was only allowed to call her 3 times a day. And I ended up running one of the largest ones in Canada. And so by the end of that year, in the summer, they taught me how to paint. Again, I was a terrible painter, but I kind of just like brute forced my way through it. I did a bunch of work. A lot of it was bad. learned that when you do bad work, people don't want to work with you again. Started to learn how to do good work, how to take care of my staff and hire people. And that was really where I found like my strength was sales and marketing. And so I kept going back every season. So for 4 years while I was in school, every year I would, market in the winter, run my business in the summer. And I ended up finding that I had zero interest in school. And while I was in class, I was sending all these emails. I was looking at my leads. I was trying to hire people and run ads. And so I just spent my entire school career running a painting business. And by the second year, I had done about 180,000 in revenue in year 2. And I thought I was like the richest man in Babylon at this point, because I had made like 80 grand in profit. I'm a student. I'm living in my parents' basement. Like I have no expenses at the time. And so I felt in that moment I was living the 1% lifestyle. And so finally I move out. I move up in the company. I become a coach, and I start teaching other students how to run this business. And then in my last year before I left, I was like, I feel like I want to do something new. And they said, well, we don't really have room for you to be a manager on the painting side, but if you want to try something new, we want to do this window cleaning thing. We've never really done it before. And it's yours to kind of be an entrepreneur and see what you can do. And so they gave me the keys, and they said, whoever you hire to be a business owner under you, it's your domain, and figure it out. And so we started building all these systems, and window cleaning was kind of a breath of fresh air coming from painting, because I started to see certain parts of the business world that I really liked and didn't like. And so before I did the painting thing, I was selling weed to my friends. And what I realized through that was that when I had bad product, customers didn't want to come back. And through painting, it was kind of the same thing. And so I was like, I think I only want to work in businesses where I'm doing like the best quality thing. And then with painting, I found out that the life cycle was really long, meaning that if I did a good job on someone's house, they didn't need me again for like a decade. And so, what's the point in doing all this great work for someone if they're not going to hire you again the next year? And so that's why I didn't really like painting. And there's a lot of liability with it. If you spill paint on someone's, $20,000 couch, you lose all your money for the summer. Another headache about it was that it takes a long time to be a good painter. Like you need people with years of experience. And I was hiring, 17-year-old students who didn't care about anything. And so you can imagine the quality was suffering. And so when I did window cleaning, it was amazing because I could hire anyone off the street. I could teach them within, a couple days to be good. Worst thing that would happen was we spilled some dirty water and had to like clean someone's carpet. It wasn't a big deal. And every year people would hire us back. Sometimes, twice a year, they would have the cleaning done. And so I went to the owners of the business, and I don't think I was going to stay that much longer anyway, because I was about to graduate. But I said, hey, like I have all these ideas. I think we should have credit cards on file. I think we should put, a recurring revenue model. I can sign all my clients back a year in advance. And they kind of just looked at me and they were like, yeah, we think we want to focus on this painting thing. And, it's all good. Like we're going to just do our thing. And so I said, I feel like I've kind of learned everything I have to learn here. So I left the company, traveled South America for a year, because I knew if I started another company, I would never take a vacation. And then my old coach at student painting, who taught me everything I knew, her name is Kendra, and she and she called me up and she said, what do you think about moving to Toronto to start that window cleaning company we've always talked about? And I said, sure, why not? It'll take away the distractions from our friends and partying, and worst case, it blows up in our face. It'll be a good story. And so we planned to do this a year from that phone call. In between that year, I moved to Toronto. I worked in sales for a tech company. I took over an Airbnb business, and we managed 20 properties doing that. Then COVID hit, we shut that down. I started a business coaching people in tech sales, how to be better at sales. And then through all that, we were kind of building this Shine thing. And Kendra was joined as a co-founder of a tech company. And we just said through all of these things, we were like, every business kind of sucks. Like this window cleaning thing is awesome. Like we can just go to someone's house, knock on their door, do a good job. The client's happy. We get paid. Like it's just immediate value. There's no venture funding and this dream that we're selling. We're not really creating anything of value. And so she sold her shares in the company, joined me, and then we kind of started dating in the moment. So the day that we had already been best friends for so many years, the day that we we moved to Toronto together was the day we also moved in together to save on rent, and we started dating at the same time. And so we launched Shine. That was 6 years ago. And since then, we basically our kind of, test run was in that first year. I went knocking on doors in Toronto. I just picked a random house on Google Maps. I said, this house looks nice. And I went out at 6 o'clock at night and I started knocking. And the first night I got like 20 leads in 3 hours, and it was a snowstorm. So I was so motivated. I was like, this is amazing. And so one thing led to another. First year went really well. Second year, I was like overwhelmed. I was getting about 110 calls a day on average between my staff, between clients, between new leads coming in. And I said, this thing is a rocket ship. It's taking off. I need help. I called my two best friends in Montreal. I convinced them to shut down their businesses, to move here and help us run it. And so I ended up marrying Kendra, and now the four of us run this business together. And there's about 40 people on the team now. And the goal is to turn this into the largest home window cleaning company in Canada, but one of the largest home service businesses in Canada for sure.
Wow, what a story. I mean, the whole build up, you met your wife there, you built from the ground up. I love that you actually took the time to travel. I mean, you did everything how it should be done, with which I'm assuming with a lot of failure along the way. But
oh yeah,
what an amazing
definitely.
story.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. I feel like it's well polished. Congratulations on your success. I feel like specifically because of the weather out there in Canada, that business is just booming. I mean, which is awesome. So when did pressure washer come into play? And then I noticed you sneaked in outdoor painting on there too.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That's
now
that's
it's
actually
like
a huge part of it
we're
now.
adding more services too.
Yeah. So with home service, I think with any business, but with home services specifically, you want to be very careful about adding services, because I think like every business owner, comes to this point where, like Alex Hormozy talks about this a lot. He's like, when people hit a wall in their business, and they usually start scrambling for, a new idea, it's usually because they're stuck somewhere and they don't know how to market or sell, or more than they already have. And so they think, if I add a new service, I can just sell that to the same clients I already have. The problem is as you scale, you really want to become really good at a few things. And the more services you have, the more operational friction you get, which makes it a miserable business to run. And it's harder to maintain quality. And so in the beginning, so my kind of deal box for what services we will and won't do are it has to be low liability, meaning I don't want to take on projects where if a worker makes a mistake, it could drown me in like a month of fixing this and a $100,000 problem, like building a house, for example. Number two is it has to be hyper scalable. So it can't be something like carpentry where you need carpenters who have 25 years of experience, because there are only so many of those guys. And number three is it has to be something that's either high margin or recurring, reoccurring or recurring. Because if I'm only going to do something once, then, I might as well get paid well for it or get to keep doing it over and over. And so what happened was we started off like most businesses where you just kind of do whatever people are going to pay you to do. And then you start to realize, okay, that, when I agreed to put up that lady's Christmas lights and, she didn't like how I wrapped them around that bush she had, like maybe that's not something that all of my staff are going to be able to do. Now that is a great business now, but in hindsight at the time it wasn't. And so I said, what can I fit in the same van where I don't need to upgrade to like $100,000 truck? Well, I can fit pressure washers. I can fit hoses. I can fit like paintbrushes and paint gear. And so initially we were just doing kind of painting and window cleaning and pressure washing and whatever we could. And about 2 years in, we said, I don't think we want to do painting anymore for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. It was a headache. It was harder to train. It was higher average ticket. So the workers were actually getting less tips on it. So they were working harder and making less money. They didn't enjoy it. And I said, well, since this is miserable, we should just stop doing it. But before we stop doing it, maybe we should just try to charge more. and see if people say yes. And whoever says yes, well then, like, great. And we were charging like ridiculously low prices at the time, but I didn't realize that. So we doubled the price and people kept saying yes. And then we doubled the price again and people kept saying yes. And it got to a point where we were charging enough where we said, wow, like this is actually a really good business because we're not doing indoor painting. Everyone knows an indoor guy who will, do an amazing job for $30 an hour. Most painters hate doing work outside for a lot of reasons, because there's risk with ladders, because of the weather, because it's messy, because there's a lot of prep that has to be done and sanding and it's annoying. And so every painter who's good turns down outdoor work. And so my kind of thesis for most businesses is get really good at the things that people suck at or don't want to do. And that's where, there's opportunity. And so again, the painting was still, kind of a bit of a headache. And we thought, maybe we'll reconsider this painting thing in a little bit. But before we do that, we have this thing where we stain decks. And in Canada, everyone has wood decks. But in Canada, because of the snow and the bad cold weather, decks are impossible to last. You can't warranty them. They always peel. And they have all this maintenance. And so nobody likes staining their deck. In fact, it's a thing where, like, if you ask someone to stain their deck, most people will say, no, don't touch it. Like, I've heard bad stories, or my cousin had this and it was a problem. And just before we shut down the deck business, I met this guy who taught me about oils that are made in Australia that don't peel, and they just hydrate the wood. And so I called every other major painting company in the city and I said, can you guys guarantee outdoor decks? And they either laughed and said, no one can guarantee decks, or they said, we don't do decks. And I said, well, I think there's an opportunity here. And so we created this division called the Deck People, where all we do is exterior deck staining. And we can actually guarantee it without having to worry about warranties. And so the year one was a success. We got almost no callbacks the next year, and we said, this is good. And that was when I said, maybe I'll try running an Instagram ad. Let's see what happens. Because I had a buddy in e-com who had a lot of success in that. And he said, you would crush ads. Like, you're really personable. Most people are terrible on being on camera. This could work. And so we, and so I had a mic running through my shirt, and you can see on the bottom of the video still, there's a wire hanging out of my shirt. And, I had my friend hold an iPhone camera and film me in my backyard, showing one neighbor's fence in the alleyway that's all moldy and black, and another fence that I actually cleaned and stained that was 3 years old. And the video essentially runs just me for 45 seconds saying, hey guys, my name's Dan. I run a local Toronto business called The Deck People, and I was wondering if you have a fence that looks like this. It's disgusting. It's ugly. It's moldy. You're probably worried about it peeling. You're worried about damaging the wood. You're worried about all this stuff. Well, if you look at this fence over here, this is 3 years old. You can see I'm not lying to you. Like, this is real. We can do this. We can make it work. And if you just click the link. And so I didn't really think anything of it. He told me to send him a bunch of videos. I sent him 10 videos. And 9 of those videos didn't perform. Like, none of them really did that well. But that one video that I did ended up just exploding to the point where it filled up our entire season. And so, there's a lot more I can talk about with ads there. But the crazy thing was, that was only over 2 months. And so I said, well, let's try it. And that was last year. So I said, let's try it again this year and see if maybe we just got lucky. And we ran it again this year. And it's now 25% of our revenue is coming from these ads. And what I found is that through talking to these customers who click on these ads, pretty much everyone said the same thing. They said, in contracting, but in general, like, it's really a gray area business. Like, it's hard to trust people. You don't know if someone's going to be good. And we saw your video. You just seemed really honest, and you seemed personable. And clearly, the job looked good. So we wanted to click. And now it's at the point where, like, the page has 3,000 followers. Like, we don't have this crazy, viral page. None of the videos we have until yesterday have been organically viral. Like, we did, 3,000 views here, 5,000 views there. But this ad, with not even that much money, has given me, like, some level of, like, micro fame in Toronto, because I'm now, like, out in public and I will meet people. Like, I got my blood done. I met someone at, like, a dinner the other night. I was like parking in an area, and people will see me and they'll be like, you're the deck guy. I get your ads all the time. And so it's kind of become this hilarious thing where, like, I'm by no means like this famous person or doing anything, but people see the ads and they're crushing. So yeah, so now decks have become like this. I think eventually it will become more than half our business, but yeah, I'm really just focused on dialing in on the deck side of the business and the cleaning side of the business.
Man, the fact that, sorry, Vin, I know it's been kind of, I mean, Dan's got stories for days, good stories for days. But the fact that you were about to close down the deck business because you, just like your competitors, didn't have a solution, instead of just giving up and focusing on the already successful business model you have with window washing, exterior paint, and pressure washing, you said, let's hold up, let's see what we can do. And you found an alternative, and now you control the market, and now you're the deck guy. Phenomenal.
And
Another
no one competes because nobody wants to stain decks. So it's this like weird niche where every painter hates it. And so we're like, not only are we now experts in the niche, but we developed a name in it. And for the homeowner, it's an easy decision because they're like, I don't want some random painter guy coming to stain my deck when Dan is here and like he can guarantee it, like he knows what he's doing. And so it became this like really awesome flywheel where the window cleaning is this lead magnet where people are just, a revolving door of clients who use us every year. And then when they're ready for their deck to be done, they call us because now we have a good experience with them and they know they can trust us.
You're the 1% right there. It's like what Gary Vee actually says too. He's like, if you want to be the best at something, do what 99% of people won't do. And the fact that you did the door knocking and started your book of business that way, that you did the cold calling, people don't like to do that. They're nervous. They're scared of failure. They're scared of success. And you took that and you said, I'm going to wear this as a suit of armor and prove myself right and prove everybody else wrong, or whatever that actually driven motives were. But you did it. That's awesome. I mean, and you're still living it today. And you met your wife and you worked with your best friends.
Yeah. And to this day, it's crazy because like now I've been doing a bit more networking and speaking, and like I went to speak at a conference for other cleaning businesses, and I get a lot of people who ask me, they're like, hey, how can I grow? I want to grow. And a lot of these people have been in business for 10 years plus, and they're still, they haven't crossed 7 figures yet. They're still doing like a couple $100,000 a year with 3 employees. And it's crazy how many people ask me, and I'm like, do you knock on doors? And they say no. And I say, well, why not? And they have all these excuses. And I'm like, okay, but if you knock on doors, you will grow. Like it is a guaranteed formula. Like I can tell you how many doors to hit per hour. I know all the numbers behind it. And a lot of them just aren't willing to do it. So, Alex Hormozy talks about this a lot. He's like, if you told someone that they could become a billionaire if they worked every single day of their life for the next 40 years, a lot of people would do it. But they don't do it because it's not a guarantee. You worry about it probably won't happen. But in this case, I'm living proof that it happens, and I can guarantee that it will work if you follow certain systems, and people still don't want to do it. So yeah, I think there was a saying that Kendra told me once that I've never forgotten. It's one of my favorite quotes, which is, if you don't get what you want in life, it's because you either didn't want it enough or you tried to negotiate over the price. And that just says that like you can literally get anything. You just have to be willing to do something that you might not want to do.
Yeah, I love that. I think the coolest part about your story is just all the different ways that you pivot. A lot of the times what people don't really understand is that you have to be able to pivot. You have to be able to see that there's a need, or you have to see that something is or isn't working. And then you double down on what works, and you start very quickly getting rid of what doesn't. And if you figure out why it doesn't work and why what worked, it starts building the formula. I think a lot of people don't understand business is a feedback cycle. You have to do the thing. You have to put it out there. You don't need the well thought out paper plans or the ladders or the this or the that. You just have to go do it. And then what starts working, I like how you got feedback too. It's like what was great or what wasn't great. And business is that. It's just constant, consistent feedback. Do something, improve it, refine it, put it back out, rinse and repeat. And then that's how you expand. That's how you grow. That's how you scale. So
It's the best
my
therapy
question
because
to you
it's literally an immediate feedback loop.
Exactly. So with that in mind, my biggest, I guess, question to you is like, what maybe in your current business or your current state of being has been one of the biggest problems that you've figured out and had to overcome in your business?
Myself, I would say myself. Yeah. You know, we've talked about this a lot. You know, Kendra is, I would say, my greatest success. And if I had to pick like my single most intelligent decision that I ever made, it was deciding to be with Kendra, because the business is a great idea and we executed well on it. But at the end of the day, you know, I do a lot of these podcasts and stuff, and we call her the Shadow Lord because she's completely invisible. She doesn't do anything on social media. And she's very much the brains behind most of the things we do. And she's very good at cutting bad ideas and catching mistakes. And she's kind of this amazing, you know, all-seeing eye that is able to look at things 10 steps ahead. And so you asked me like what the biggest challenge has been. I would say in the beginning, you know, when you start a business, a lot of it is just about work. It's just like I always say, under $1 million like in revenue, you pretty much just need to work more and better and refine your talent. But once you cross a certain threshold, hard work does not get you any further because you're already working 80 hours a week or 100 hours a week, and you have no more hours to put in, and you have to work smart. And that's where your skills and your, you know, psychology kind of come into play. And I would say that over the last couple years, I went from a place where I was, you know, the rainmaker. I was the best person in the room. I was, you know, creating all the value for the team, where now we have 40 people on this team, and my hard work doesn't count for as much. And it got to a point where I needed to develop a new set of skills. I needed to be a better coach, a better leader. I needed to get better at delegating and monitoring people and, you know, giving them the assistance they needed, rather than just kind of playing my own game alone. And I would say that, you know, to this day, I still struggle with it. So by no means have I figured this out, but Kendra has been the person that's kind of poked and prodded me to constantly see that and, you know, just kind of check my ego. And a couple of years, I would say like last year is really where this started, where, you know, she basically told me like, at the end of the day, Dan, like this company is going to outgrow you if you don't figure this out. And, you know, you're the owner because, you know, you started this thing, but you don't want to be the owner because you started this thing. Like you want to be the owner because the people on the team think you should be the owner. And I think I hit a point where I developed this sense of like, okay, you know, I've made it this far in life. Like our business is successful. Like I've figured it out. Like I am the guy. And it prevented me from learning in a lot of ways. It prevented me from recognizing a lot of things that I was doing that wasn't serving the team, that wasn't helpful, where I was doing the things I wanted to do instead of the things that I needed to do. And so, you know, it's just been quite the journey over the last 2 years of kind of going through therapy and reading books and, you know, just really kind of having to kill my own ego and destroy who I thought I was. And if I could articulate that, I would say I had built up this perception of myself because over time, yeah, I guess for whatever reason, you know, through childhood and whatever, you know, I had this perception of myself and I was like, this is who I am. And this is my kind of my shield from the world. And that shield prevented me from being vulnerable in a lot of ways and seeing a lot of my flaws. And I think that the number one biggest challenge that I faced has been breaking that down and being curious instead of getting angry when someone challenges me or calls me out. It's been, you know, just like trying to take 100% accountability and responsibility for a situation and think about how I'm impacting others instead of how they're impacting me. And really just asking myself, like, am I being the best leader that I can be every day? Or am I letting people down?
I love that, man. It's It's very important. I'm glad that you brought up that point of like yourself, because I know factually that an organization can never grow past the capacity of the leadership. If you're a 2,
Yep.
your organization will be a 2. Conversely, if you're a 10, you could get your organization to a 10. And then on the other side of it, if you bring in a leader to a thriving organization, the organization's a 10 and you're a 2, you're going to bring that thing right down to a 2. So for
Yep.
every entrepreneur or executive or somebody who's in a high position of power out there that's listening, always remember that if you actually want your business to grow, you must also grow too. So Dan, we're kind of coming close to the end here. We got two last questions for you before we wrap up today. One of them being this. Our show is the 1% podcast, where we say that you don't have to be a billionaire to be a 1%er. Obviously, that helps. However, what it is it's a way of life. It's how you show up. It's what you're striving to be amazing at and excellent at every single day. So for you, what is your version of a 1% life? What are you striving towards?
I think that my answer has changed a lot in the last couple months. I think that for the last decade, my mindset has been very much centered around, get as I see revenue as a score more than I see it as like the money being important. And to me, it was always about like, how do I get a higher score? Because that score would validate me. And if I could do, another 0, and if I could become a billionaire or whatever, it would mean that I became the best at the game. And I never really asked myself, like, what was behind that? Like, why do I feel the need to say that I'm the best or to feel that I'm the best at this? And so over the last couple weeks, I've done a lot of, introspection, and I've realized that every year we get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm arguably less happy than I was when I had a fraction of the money that I had now. And I was just starting the business, and I was doing all the work that I didn't enjoy doing. And, now I'm so far removed from the day-to-day operations, and I'm not knocking on doors myself, but I'm less happy. And I realized it's because I'm not, I slowed down my personal growth a lot. And I think fulfillment is giving what you've got, and happiness is getting what you want. And I think that chasing fulfillment is really the thing that I need to do if I want to be content. And so my definition now of the 1% life is to give what I've got every single day, whether it's, going to the gym, whether it's having hard conversations with people and looking at myself and what I did wrong, whether it's, going to a job site and being able to just, let my staff take care of things, but instead choosing to be hands-on and assist them and do, whatever the hardest thing is that I need to do instead of what I want to do. And obviously, money comes with that, but there's diminishing returns with wealth. And once, I think, once you make past like 70K a year, I think the study is, or 80K a year, your happiness per dollar goes down drastically. And so we're very fortunate. And I think I just want to have like good relationships with the 4 people that I care about most, and my dog. And I just want to keep learning and growing and be able to have the freedom to live my life. And I think I'm pretty close to that already.
And where did you develop that ideology? Where did you start learning that? Like, what's something that our listeners can do to start getting to a point where you're at? Like, how did you come to some of these conclusions?
I think that it's been kind of like a bit of a road. I think the first thing was when I started when I was 19. I'm 30 now. I was following Gary Vee like right before, maybe as he was kind of starting popping off, and he always said, you have to love the process. If you don't love the process, you're going to be miserable. And so when I had my worst days ever, I was covered in paint, and it was 11 o'clock at night, and a client had just yelled at me, and I was out in the rain, and I was just, wanted to kind of give up. I just had to learn to laugh at myself and be like, this is part of the game. And I love this game. Even though this moment sucks, like, I'm going to overcome it. And I'm so excited to do that. So I think that was kind of the first mindset shift where, in your most miserable situations, you have to be able to look at it and think, this is part of the game, and you have to love the struggle of it. And over time, I wish that not everybody has to get to this point in order to figure it out. But, you think you're going to be happy when, you make 100 grand, and then you make 100 grand and you go, wow, like I want to buy a house. And like, you need way more money than 100 grand to buy a house in Canada, in Toronto. It's like the average house is like $1.5 million. So then the milestone moves, and now all of a sudden you're like, I need more money, and I need to work harder. I need to do more. And so you can't seek happiness from that, and you can't seek happiness from thinking, if only I get to this point, because once you get to that point and you stop working towards something else, you fall back into this sense of like, I'm this person, I have this ego to protect. And so how did I get here? I would say it's, the Gary Vee thing. I think it's through, constantly just like struggling and overcoming obstacles. And I would say most recently, it's, from having a business partner, a wife, and a friend who just like shits on me every time I deserve to be shat on, and tells me when I'm being complacent, or, when I need to hear something that I may not want to hear, and actually recognizing that, she has my best interest at heart, and listening to her. And I would say, something that everyone can take that most people don't, is to pick who you spend your life with wisely, because the person you choose to marry is arguably the most important decision you will ever make in your entire life. And I would say that probably 90% of people I know who decide to get married or engaged or a girlfriend or whatever, they don't do it because that person is genuinely the best person for them. They don't have a list of things that they're looking for in a partner, or a list of their values of what they want in that person. They're with that person because it was, they started dating. They liked the person enough that to continue seeing them. There's not enough problems to break up with them. And they go, well, we've been together for 2 years or 3 years or whatever it is, and I don't have a reason to break up. And now we're 29. We might as well get married. And they end up together. And that's why half of the marriages end up in divorce. And so I'm not, going to sit here and say I have a perfect marriage or whatever the case may be, but I can say that out of, anyone that I can think of or that I've ever met in my life, she's definitely the best person for me. And I chose to be with someone who I knew was going to be smarter than me, and who was going to call me out of my shit, and who I was going to be able to really build the things I wanted to build with. And there's a lot of people out there who their partner, doesn't want to build those things with them. They're not on the same page, and they don't rip the cord because they're afraid of going out there and being alone. And I just think that's a huge mistake.
Kendra better be listening to this podcast. That's all I'm going to say. Shout out to you, Kendra. Dan, thank you so much for sharing. And once again, congratulations to your success. I think truly being a hustler, having the right people behind you and with you with your business just speaks miles here. And I personally think that it's not the destination, it's the actual travel to get to the destination. That's the fun part. And then once you get to that part, you need new goals. You need bigger goals. I was in that same type of boat when I had the transition into delegation aspect, and compared to doing everything myself, I had to learn an entire new skill set that also came with new milestones and aspirations. And then it gave me a more general purpose and drive and drive. So anyways, I just wanted to say, I applaud you. This is amazing. And congratulations again.
Dan, please tell everybody, how can they get in touch to get any of your amazing services that you may offer? Where should people find you?
The Deck Guy.
Yeah, so
the Deck Guy. Check out his deck. It's big.
My our Instagram account, the Deck People Toronto. We also have Shine Window Cleaners as well, and we're on TikTok too. And if you want to reach out to me personally, my Instagram is probably the best way, and my handle is at Dan's Views. That's DANSVIEWS. And yeah, love connecting with people, whether or not they have a house that needs to be taken care of.
I love it. Well, you heard it here, folks. Go check out what Dan's got going on. Get a deck, get a window, get a painting, get whatever you want. Just go get something from Dan. So, as always, guys, we are the 1% podcast. Please like, share, follow, subscribe, leave a comment or two. Let us know what you thought. And we'll see you next time. I'm your host, Vin, and
I'm Shane.
that was Dan. We're out, everybody. Have a good one.